Yay! So this is the starting of the recording for our Dance Horizons Exploring Dance Culture discussion panel. We are super, super excited. Before we dive into anything about the event or about the awesome speakers we have or check-ins with each other, I wanted to start off with a land acknowledgement. So, I mean, I'm sure you've all heard one before, but I do take a bit of issue with the way that they're done sometimes. It can be very monotonous, and it's a really important thing to do, and it deserves a lot more attention than it gets. I realize land acknowledgements are kind of weird right now since we're probably scattered potentially all over the country or all over the globe. So I'm just going to do one about the territory that me and my co-hosts are speaking from. We are also all in different places, but Dance Horizons is UBC club, so we're going to do it from the UBC land that it's located on. But regardless of where you are at this particular time, I do want to encourage you always, and remind myself always, to think about the land that you're living or working or dancing or studying on, who it belonged to, and who its history, and how people that came before you and their relationship to the land. Oh, sorry, I'm having a bit of a Zoom. There we go. How their relationship to the land affects your current relationship to it, and other people's as well. So if you don't know the land that you're on, that is okay, but I'm going to include a little link here for this really great website that I know of. It's called nativeland.ca, so I'm just going to pop that up in the chat there for everybody. And that's just a reference for you to have later and share with your friends. There's also a couple apps that do this as well, where you can literally type in your address and it will show you a map of, you know, if you're on Musqueam territory or Tsleil-Waututh or Squamish. So really important to look at. That's a great link for that. So I'm gonna continue on here. As a UBC club, UBC is located on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Musqueam peoples. Unceded meaning that it was never legally signed over to the Crown or the Canadian government, just for that definition there. And the Musqueam people are one of various culturally and linguistically distinct nations that comprise the Coast Salish, which most of BC occupies and also trickles down the west coast into the States as well. Vancouver, again, specifically, is Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh territories for the majority of it. So I just want you to take a minute to recognize the colonial, discriminatory, and racist practices that have taken place here and continue to occur on this land that oppress particularly Indigenous communities and other marginalized communities. So we want to acknowledge that UBC is built and continues to develop directly on top of Musqueam territory, and just to keep that in mind. And while giving land acknowledgements is really important and it's great, it is just a first step in educating ourselves. There is so much more work that comes after that in decolonializing these practices. So just keep all that in mind as we move forward today. Great. So with that bit, I will move forward with the event. Thank you all for being here. I'm super excited. We're super excited. Before I get much further, you're probably like, who is this girl who's talking? So I'll just introduce myself real quick. My name is Heather Mcnichol. I'm a fourth year behavioral neuroscience student at UBC. My pronouns are she, her, hers. You're welcome to include or not include your pronouns. It's up to you if you're introducing yourself. I've been dancing with DH since, as in Dance Horizon, since first year. A brief overall about Dance Horizons. We've been around for about 35 plus years at UBC, teaching various different styles of dance with professional teachers in the community to various different levels, beginner to advanced. So we really love what we do. This event is the first that I know of that DH has done that's kind of similar to this, and we're really hoping that it goes well as I'm blabbering on so that we can continue to do it and do similar things and have these conversations in the future as well for upcoming terms. Yeah, So that's enough of me talking. I'm going to really quickly let my co-hosts introduce themselves. They have been working with me on this event for the past several weeks, and they're super awesome. So Campbell or Nika, if you want to introduce yourself. Either one.
Hi, I'm Nika. I'm in my 4th and last year of sociology at UBC. Yeah, Heather was working on this project all by herself. She did most of the heavy lifting of this project, and finally we were asked if anyone was willing to help her, and we were like, definitely, Heather's super cool and this is super important. So shout out to Heather for creating this initiative, and yeah, thanks for letting me be part of your team.
That's totally not true. They did a lot, and so did other execs on the team, but thank you. I appreciate that, Nika. You rock. You've been great. And Campbell?
Yeah, hi. So I'm Campbell Sweety. I'm in my 2nd year studying English literature at UBC, and I'm also an events executive with Dance Horizons. I've been dancing with Dance Horizons since my 1st year, and yeah, I'm really excited to learn with everyone today. So, yeah.
Yay! Thank you, Campbell. Campbell does literally everything. He's involved in all of the things all the time. It's awesome. Yeah, so just a brief overview of today before I can introduce our actual speakers and I can stop talking for a little bit. We're going to introduce who we have on our panel today. I'm super excited about it. They're going to give, some of them are going to give little talks on their topic of choice. And then we have some preset questions that they are aware of that we're going to ask them about to get discussion going. And then we'll open up the floor to question and answer period for anyone who wants to ask their own questions. And then we'll have some closing remarks. And that'll bring us to 2 hours probably. Just one more thing sort of before we dive into the meat of it. I know I don't have to say this with any of you because you're all wonderful adult people who are here to learn. And so that makes me know that I'm sure you're all lovely and wonderful. But this is a learning space. And so judgment, we're going to leave that at the door. Anything that is harmful, bigotry, discriminatory will not be tolerated. So I will have to ask people to leave if any inappropriate behavior is going on. But again, I'm sure it won't because you're all lovely and I'm so happy you're here. Just wanted to put that out there. With that said, I can get into introducing our speakers. We have 5, do we have 5 speakers on today? Yes, we have a bunch of really, really incredible panelists. We are so, so grateful to each of them for coming to share their time and their wisdom and their knowledge and their experiences with us. It's going to be really great and really enlightening. And I'm just going to give some brief intros, sort of touching on bios that they sent us so that you know who you're talking to. But I'm sure that they will add on with their own information if they would like. And also speakers and anybody, if I call your name, if I mispronounce your name, please correct me. Some of your names I have not heard from you out loud. So I just want to make sure that I'm doing the right job there. Yeah, I'm here to learn. So it's going to be great. A quick sip of water and then we'll get into it. You guys ever get that when you're in like quarantine, you don't speak to another human all day and then your words are, yeah, it's a lot. Awesome. So our first speaker is Sabrina Naz Commanescu. I'm saying that correctly? Spot on, she says, beautiful. So Sabrina is a member of the Calgary dance community. She works as a professional performer, choreographer, dance instructor, filmmaker. She does it all. She's worked with a whole bunch of different amazing people, Michael Montano, host of, I hope it's Danger Cat, but it might be Danger Cat. The Bad Girls Club YYC, Ill Effects Entertainment. She's done a whole bunch of different things, and she's in her 6th year performing with Decidedly Jazz Dance Works in Calgary, Alberta, which is really cool. I've seen them before. I'm a big fan. She's also a major force behind the Diversity Performing Arts Club of Calgary, and it celebrates cultural diversity and promotion of inclusion in youth. She has also created Casa de Naz, which is a collective mission to excite and educate art hubs across Canada. about the thriving Caribbean community and the Caribbean as a whole. So she is super, super amazing. And I know her and Nika go back a little bit, so Nika knows her a lot better, but we're super excited to have her. I'm just gonna give a little spiel about everybody so that you all know, but our next speaker is Ajay Musodi. Did I say that correctly? Please, okay, great. Yeah, AJ is a phenomenal dance artist and educator. He's got 8+ years of experience as a choreographer, dancer, teacher, professionally. He also leads residencies in English and French, which allows students to explore dance movement and history in a bilingual setting, which is really amazing and unique. He trains in hip hop. I didn't actually know how to pronounce this, and I tried to Google Translate, but I couldn't. The Dolombo? It's in the bio. I don't know, AJ, if you want to tell me.
I'm with you. We still got 2 for 2 for like me and Sabrina, so that's good. But that's Dombolo. That was pretty good though. I like it.
Okay. Fantastic. And also, thanks for chiming in there, AJ, and also Afro House and Creative Movement. He has trained all over the world: New York, Mexico, France, Las Vegas, Vancouver, Edmonton, Calgary. He's really done it all. Recent credits are first place at World of Dance Las Vegas last year, first place at Monsters in Santa Clarita, top scoring junior hip hop choreographer, and first place at AE in Vancouver a couple years ago. He's got a lot under his belt. And aside from the competitive choreography, he teaches a lot of in-school hip hop residency programs across Canada. And he just loves to spread the infectious culture of hip hop dance and teach youth about it, and acknowledgement, self-love, appreciation, and diversity. And he's also, you guys probably have seen him around Studio North. He teaches there and does a lot of like cultural directing there as well. So he's wonderful. And then we also have our third guests are Sinbirds, which is Clement and Serge. You're going to have to make sure I say your last names correctly. Clement Rugwiro. Nice. And Serge, I practiced this before. Biriteye? Is that right? Yeah. Okay, he's nodding. Sweet. Yeah, so they are both from Kenya, but they met at UBC in their first year. I had always assumed they were like childhood friends, but they met in their first year at UBC and were instantly connected through their love of music and dance. And they, at the time, the presence of dancehall and Afrobeats in UBC in the larger Vancouver area was quite small. And so they have really been founding in that, especially at UBC, but throughout Vancouver. And so they've been diversifying the dance scene. And they created Sinbirds from that. We've been quite familiar with them at Dance Horizons. We see them around a lot. They're always practicing, always performing. They host classes around UBC. They also teach, I believe, down at the Dance Center. I'm pretty sure it wasn't in your bio, but I know that you teach there as well. Vancouver summer programs. They've performed at Jumpstart, the Welcome Back Barbecue. So these are huge functions that UBC hosts. And they've also performed for major Afrobeat artists in Vancouver, like Burna Boy, WizKid, and Diamond Platinums. So they've done a lot of really cool stuff. We're excited to have them both. Yeah. And then our last speaker here is Sophia. Sophia, I will invite you. She was a bit of a late addition, but we're super happy to have her. So I've compiled a bio based on things that I know and I've researched about you, but if anything is wrong, please correct me. Sophia Gamboa is part of Immigrant Lessons, which is how we got in touch with her. So Immigrant Lessons is an amazing dance and art collective. They're based in Vancouver. It's currently directed by one of its founders, Kevin Frazier. I don't know if Kevin's here today, but he is also amazing. He's got a huge dancehall background, and he used to teach. Yeah, he used to teach for all over the place, but we used to have him at Dance Horizons as well before he got so busy. So we are very familiar with Immigrant Lessons and all the fantastic work that they do. And it was created as to promote cultural pluralism through dance, music, fashion, and visual design. So Sophia herself was born and raised in Manila in the Philippines and immigrated to Vancouver, Canada when she was 13. So then since 2007, She's begun training under pioneers in the Vancouver hip hop and street dance scene. She's participated and been a part of a ton of freestyle battles and the entire street dance community here. In 2016, she discovered a love of dancehall. If you go to her Instagram page, which I was on today, she does a lot of dancehall stuff, which is really, really cool. She's fantastic. And actually became part of Vancouver's first dancehall theater production, which was Dons and Amp, Divas, Blood, Sweat, and Tears. So that's really fantastic. Following this, so she's trained under and performed with a whole bunch of different really amazing people. Following that is when she joined Immigrant Lessons, which I've talked about prior. And then since joining that, she's been exploring the world of contemporary dance, which she is also a beautiful mover in. And she is also, Sophia, correct me if I'm wrong, but you're the founder of the Barangay Project, is that correct?
I am the founder of Barangay Project.
Barangay. Awesome, thank you. She's the founder of Barangay Project, where she inspires and provides dance and art lessons and culture and spaces, particularly for BIPOC youths. So she is super amazing. Yeah. Yay. Fantastic. So that is a lot of me talking again. Those are some brief intros so you know who we've got on our panel here. Thank you all for being here. We really appreciate it. And yeah, going from there, I know for sure that Sabrina, we chatted with her, has sort of a little talk that she's going to give. Do any of our other speakers have things that they have prepared that they wanted to share? So I can keep assessment of time. AJ, 2 for 2. Clement and Serge, did you have anything you had prepped, or were you like, we came to answer questions and we're good? So okay, we'll come down through there. And Sophia, I mean, you're also welcome to give a little speech if you want, but I know you were sort of thrown in last minute, so I don't expect you to have anything. So yeah, we're super happy. Sabrina, if you want to take us away.
Hello. Fantastic. Okay. So as I was prepping, big quotations there. No, as I was prepping, I received an email from Heather, and the email was like just a list like this long of so many questions. And I was like, wait a minute, this is fantastic. I'm gonna answer these questions. That's the talk. There it is. Answer the questions. So how I'm gonna go about this, friends, is that I have a little document here where I've listed out all the questions. I've done my best to answer them. Fantastic questions. Thank you so much. And I noticed, Heather, that they're kind of broken down in like 3 big sections. So one is jazz, one is sort of general, and one is more specifically tailored to dance hall. So I think what I'll do is go through a section and then open up the floor to some dialogue, because ultimately these are your questions, you guys, and I would just love to hear maybe if something more percolates from the answers that I'm kind of digging up. Is that cool?
Yeah.
Yes.
Also, if you'd like, if you ask a question that maybe one of the other hosts also received in their email, you guys can all answer it. I don't know.
It's open. It's so open. So if you guys got that question too, please chime in. And then I'll also just say, like, Heather, if you find like I'm going over, you just give me a little nudge there in the chat and I will
That's really funny you say that, because I like to talk a lot, and I told Nika and Campbell, I was like, if I'm going too long, you have to tell me to stop.
Perfect.
So no worries.
Okay, cool. So the first thing I noticed on this list, jazz, capital letters, all caps, the origins of jazz. So the first question was, where does it come from and how did it come to be so commercialized today? So I think like that's a very open question. Something that is commercialized, ultimately, I think it goes there because it is loved by the masses. So in a way, I think that's a good thing, that we can see it on like a pop culture, a popular culture level. It's just once it transitions to a platform that is accessible to all, how can we also stay authentic and connected to the roots? That's a question that I would pose to any commercial platform. Okay, great. You recognize that the masses loves this style and this genre. How can you also honor its roots while you present it? That's a question that I would answer with. Another thing to answer that is, and I'm going to copy and paste a link here in the chat. Jazz has a very broad and long history. So I could spend 3 hours or a year trying to explain, okay, so jazz started here and then it went there. I find that this Ken Burns series published by PBS is fantastic. There are like 8 episodes where they go in depth into jazz and every stage of jazz, from its inception to what we see in maybe like the early 2000s. So if you guys want to learn more about jazz, I think that's definitely worth checking out. But when I explain jazz, I like to say that it's kind of like a mixed kid, like you've got Mama Africa and you've got Papa Europe coming together in some interesting circumstances on indigenous land, on North American land. And here you have jazz. Jazz is a byproduct of American culture. And just like reggae and just like calypso, it spreads like wildfire throughout the world, and the world loves it. The masses love it. It is a style that represents the American people. It is for the people, by the people. You cannot have jazz without its African and its European influences. So if you are practicing in jazz, we must reference the mother and father of jazz, the two, right? So that's something that I'll say. And if you have any questions percolating about that, please share, please ask. Another question that was on this list is, what is the relationship between ballet and jazz? Ultimately, jazz is a genre of music and it is a genre of dance. There are many different styles within jazz. So when I'm asked that question, automatically I go to, what is the end product? What am I trying to say through jazz? So maybe I'm trying to choreograph a swing piece. Like, swing music is a huge part of jazz. I might not reference my ballet training in that moment. But if I'm doing a modern jazz piece where I really need to be on my leg and maybe there's a high kick that needs to be turned out with a pointed foot, I might warm up with some tendus and something of that nature. I can definitely share that within Decidedly Jazz in the company, we do train in ballet. Simply because our choreographer, our artistic director, Kimberly Cooper, may need us to be secure and strong in certain movement. She needs us to stand on that leg. She needs us to whip around in time in that turn. We might lean on our ballet technique, but we also train in West African. So all of these styles and the pairing and the fusing of these styles are very informative to the work that we're doing in DJD. We also train in Afro-Cuban. We also here and they take a funk class. So I think ultimately when we look at jazz and jazz dance, because it is this really broad genre, we have to ask, well, what are you trying to say? What is the end product? What is your goal? What's your intention stepping into jazz? Maybe it is a Latin jazz piece. You might want to bring in some salsa into your tendu exercise to make sure you're super ready for whatever you're going to say through jazz. I say all of this to say that it is not so simple. It is not a yes or no question as to, does jazz need ballet? Does ballet need jazz? What are you trying to say through jazz? I train, if I want to step into a house aesthetic, a style, a genre, how am I wanting to? What are my influences? Do I want to give it a Latin flavor? Well, maybe I should train in some Latin styles. Am I trying to go in a more Afro house direction? Well, maybe I should take a Sabar class so that can help me with my Afro house dance. I don't think we need to necessarily push anything to the side or exclude anything, but really ask ourselves, why are we stepping into the style and what is the intention? Yes. Oh, another question that was asked, I noticed, is who were the original pioneers of jazz? This is a very open and broad question. There are many people who influenced the style of jazz. A list I have here for you is, and if you want to write this down to continue your exploration, is Josephine Baker, Bob Fosse, the Nicholas brothers. We have Luigi, whose real name is Eugene Luis Facito. I don't know, but Luigi is who he goes by. That's a beautiful technique that we really lean on in DJD, Decidedly Jazz. There's also Bill Bojangles Robinson, who is known as the father of tap dance. Look up these people, read up on their biographies, become inquisitive of the pioneers on your own to help you with your exploration of the style, right? There's also Jack Cole. He has a very interesting journey that takes him from the States all the way to India and then back to the States. And it's interesting how his training influences his style and his technique of jazz. There's also Matt Maddox. There's also Betsy Hugh. Betsy Hugh, she has more of a funk approach, very popular in the 70s, but in DJD, we really rely on some of these contracted shapes in our movement. There's also the Jump Rhythm Jazz Company that's based in Chicago. Those are some techniques that have really influenced the jazz that we do at DJD and may also really influence your exploration in jazz. I don't know. Does anyone have anything bubbling up with anything I've said lately? No, that's okay. I'm just going to keep going. A question that I have here is, oh yes, so an interesting question. Why do you teach / dance in this style? I love it. I love the music and I love the history. As passionate and heartbreaking as it is, it's rich and very informative to how I approach dance as a whole. So that is why I do that. You also asked me, how do you think competitive dance has transformed jazz and how it's taught? And this question pops up a few times in the other sections, right, about competitive dance. I will put it out there for everyone. I'm not a competitive dancer. I did not grow up in that world. I am more of like a grassroots dancer. My mother created a performing arts club years ago, and I just stepped in there with her, Diversity Performing Arts Club of Calgary. And a lot of my training in dance is through rehearsal, is through performance. We have a show, learn this thing right here, you got to dance it. That's the backbone of my dance training in styles such as Afro-Caribbean, funk, to name a few. But I will say, from the outside looking in to that world, in competitive jazz, I find that there's a bit of a stripping of the African roots in that style, which is very interesting because the African roots, the African expression is about 50% of what jazz is. Like I said, it's like a mixed kid running around on indigenous land. How can we only reference just the dad? Well, mom and dad had to come together to make this kid, no? So when I look at the competitive world, I miss the rhythmic sophistication and the groundedness. I see a lot of reference to maybe the European lines in the body, but we miss the African bend. We miss the movement of the torso. I said syncopation already. Groove is a huge thing in jazz, not just swing, but also in a modern jazz, there's a way to feel the music. There's a way to reference the music, which if you do that is so complementary to its history and to its style, right? So that's my thought on the competitive jazz world. I don't know, any comments, you guys? Is there anything bubbling up?
I have a question or
Please.
comment. I don't know. It's just something that was floating around in my brain. I did grow up doing like competitive, that very like stereotypical studio dance that you see, which is, I mean, great physical training in a lot of ways, but I, looking back at it as I got older, did see a lot of really kind of toxic elements of that competitive world. That's just my personal experience.
Right.
But I'm wondering, like, when you were mentioning sort of the stripping away, I think was the words that you used, African culture and influence and aspect on it, I had never really thought of it phrased that way. Do you, I don't know, I guess just an opinion thing, do you think that's intentional on a larger scale, or do you think it's a product of something else? I don't really know how to phrase this question, but does that make sense?
I understand what you're asking. I definitely think it all goes down to timing of when people are learning. So our generation, I think it's definitely a product. Like, we are seeing jazz in a certain way, so there's just a lot of mimicking going on. I hope that the teachers who taught us and the teachers who are teaching now aren't making it a choice to ignore the African connection or the Afrocentric connections within jazz. I think it's what we've seen over the years. That is my hope. That's how I can answer that question. Ultimately, like, jazz in a way is kind of a folk comment on dance. And we see what happens to folk dance in the dance industry, right? It's kind of pushed off to the side. And with pop culture and with commercial influences, things become sometimes a little more simplified. And I think folk dances can be really intricate and layered. So now if you bring that into like the 21st century and into our small studios, I think it's easier for people to just go for like mimicry, like, oh, this is what I've seen in a commercial setting, so this is what I'll teach. Whereas as a teacher, there should be more studying going on. There should be more digging going on. But sometimes that doesn't happen. Sometimes resources aren't available. I'm not making excuses for the teachers, but, you know, for like in a competitive dance world, I think what's happening is that it's a product, like people are mimicking a product versus intentionally disregarding history. In the 21st century, this is what I believe. Now, if you were learning jazz in the 80s, if you were learning jazz in the 60s, I think that's a totally different conversation, right? How come when jazz was starting to really pick up, in, let's say, like the 50s, the 60s, what's happening to the Lindy Hoppers? Why aren't the Lindy Hoppers being brought on stage? What is it about the ballet dancer that has more knowledge of dance and is now being choreographed in a jazz world versus the Lindy Hoppers? I am still a student and I'm still trying to figure that connection out. Where does that separation happen in the history, in the historic timeline, right? But I want to say, in my generation of learning jazz, I think it's just a product thing. This is what they saw. This is what they teach. You know? That was a really long answer.
That was great. Thank you.
And great. I also wanted to say that I was also a competitive jazz dancer for like 10
Cool.
years. And what you said about like the separation of like the European and the Afro side kind of made me think about like when you go to a dance competition, and if it's a jazz category especially, you're gonna hear a lot of Black artists. Like you will never go to a dance competition to a jazz solo portion and not hear Respect by Aretha Franklin. Like it's just like illegal. Just like you'll always hear these artists, but then I'm wondering if you're not dancing true to them, if that makes sense.
I mean, again, from the outside looking in, right? Like I've never, that's not a community or an environment that I'm a part of. I would even say, like, just off of that comment, Nika, it's interesting that like Aretha Franklin, Respect, like that song would be chosen for a jazz portion of a competition, because I don't consider Aretha Franklin to be a jazz singer. I think she's soul. I think she's funk. You know, does she have jazz influences? Of course. Could she sing it? Of course. But I'm interested in why wasn't Nina Simone brought into those spaces? More questions that I pose to help us all think about this style. Yeah, I've had experiences where like I went to Broadway Dance Center in New York and I took a jazz class, but J-Lo was the artist of choice. And I said, well, this is so interesting coming from DJD, right? Where like we train as jazz dancers training to jazz music. It was interesting that we were dancing to pop. Huh. More questions, more thoughts that I pose to the group to think about. Is there anything else? Anything else anyone wants to think about and share? I'm just going to keep scrolling. Another question I got here is, oh, this was a good one. Is there such a thing as jazz culture, and how would you describe it in your experience? This made me think about the fact that art, as much as it stands strongly on its own as its own thing, jazz is a byproduct of culture, right? Like, yeah. And they influence each other and they reveal things to each other. Art reveals society to itself, right? Like that's something that I just heard recently in a I think it was a PBS documentary on Harry Belafonte, and he said that, and I was like, whoa, that's amazing. But truly, that's what it is. So is there such thing as jazz culture? Well, is there such thing as American culture? Then yes, there must be jazz culture. I feel very blessed to experience it on the daily with my company position. And I experience it every time that I do listen to jazz music, or I've made my efforts to go to a jazz club. I've been to many jazz clubs in New York and in Calgary, and the experiences, they vary, but they're all very informative. So yes, culture is a byproduct of art. Art is a byproduct of culture. So I think the answer to that is yes. Another question I got, these were great questions. Another question I got was, what are your thoughts on labeling certain styles as technical or technique based and excluding others? And the only answer I could come up to that question was, what is the definition of technique? Let's look at that. So technique, the definition is a way of carrying out a particular task, especially the execution or performance of an artistic work or a scientific procedure. That is the definition of technique. So ultimately, what are your thoughts on labeling certain styles as technique? Yeah, I think everything. I think there's a technique to everything. I think there's definitely a way to do something. Now, how you do it is how you are going to show appreciation to that style and to that culture. How you do it, and what is your intention of doing it and practicing it. Is there any thoughts about that? Does anyone have a thought? Yes. Sophia, are you?
I wanna ask also, because this was kind of what we were talking about earlier when we had an immigrant lessons meeting about. We were talking about Black bodies participating in Black culture, or non-Black bodies participating in Black culture.
Okay.
And we were questioning, or we were questioned as to how does one who is a non-Black person participate in somebody else's culture without being
intrusive.
Yes, or without overlooking the importance of technique and foundation, and not dilute the technique.
Well, that's a big question. And I can only share my opinion. I think ultimately, acknowledgement is so important. Setting your intention like that. Okay, let's say the non-Black person, they need to set their intention as to why they want to participate. And if the intention is good, I think a lot of good can come from that. I don't think anyone should ever overlook technique, or what is the way of that culture? What is the way of that style? It's hard because on one end, how can we be territorial over art? How can you be territorial over culture? These are questions that have been bubbling up in my mind recently on this topic of appreciation, appropriation, and a guest and someone who is rooted in the style. How can we be territorial of something so vast as art? But also, there are pioneers. There are also people with lived experiences that birthed the style. So I think it comes down to you as a guest, you have to acknowledge what you are stepping into, acknowledge that you are a guest. That's huge. Like, let that be known. And then I think you have to set your intention. Is it monetary? Like, are you out here trying to teach hip hop to make a quick buck? Or wait a minute, dance hall is so hot right now. I'm going to teach it because it makes me feel good so I can get paid. Like, is this how you push the culture forward? Is this how you enrich the culture and the lives of the people that you're sharing it to? Is that the intention? I don't think that's a good intention. Is your intention, I love it. It wakes me up to myself. It makes me feel so grounded. Well, these are great intentions. Explore that.
I love that you were mentioning intentions a lot, because that's something that I think about a lot, is mindfulness.
Yes.
Through art and through movement. And I guess I'm just thinking about how many times I've been in workshops and I would see students and I would hear them ask, like, it almost sounds like, how much of this do I need to learn before I can start teaching it? And to me, to me, as a dancer, as an artist who take the time to really immerse myself in the culture, to me, I kind of found it offensive because I'm like,
very offensive.
What? Are you seriously asking that?
You don't get to. Sorry, continue.
Oh, because especially nowadays, like, I see so many dancers who take classes for 3 months, 6 months. Oh, I read this book. I took a class from this OG. And 3 months, 6 months later, they're already teaching, when the intention of the practice or the medium that you're trying to teach is not even fully grasped.
Yeah.
So
Oh yeah.
Intentions for sure. Like, is it for commodity or
yeah.
yeah.
I hear you. And you know, that's when I go to the teacher. That's when I start to change my focus towards the teacher, because ultimately, how are you sharing these styles? How are you educating on culture? And like, can you also teach beyond yourself, in the sense that you have to let people know that like content is an art, and it doesn't like add up. It's not just like a math equation that you can just add up and you get X amount of points and now you can go to the, it's like art is lived experience, and encouraging your students to like be inquisitive, like learn more, know that once you hit a layer, just know that there are about 10 more, and once you reach that 10th layer, there are about 50 more layers, like the and putting, like, letting people know that that journey is so exciting, and that's how you become, I don't know if you want to use a flashy word, a master, like the 10,000 hours, like this whole idea of go deeper. And once you think you've hit the deepest point, you go even more. Like the educator kind of needs to come with that energy as well. If you don't, then we do risk dancers thinking that it is sort of like a point system, and okay, and so now I have X amount, and so now I can share. Like, it's not like you can share, we can all share, right? I find when I teach a jazz class, I'm sharing. But it's very different than when, you know, our founder at DJD, Vicki Adams Willis, is teaching. She's sharing, but she's like teaching now. Like, she is 70 years old. She's teaching me something. She's not just like, this is what I figured out, you know? So when I hear you say that, Sophia, a part of me is like, damn, I can't really blame the student in the class. That's something that I have to bring to the teacher. Why is the teacher making it so, the word isn't accessible, but why is why so casual? Why so, like, this is culture. We can't just be so casual with our offerings, you know? There was a question here that actually talks about teachers. There's a question here that says, how can dance teachers improve on teaching dance culture and history to their students? And so I'll also open it up to the other speakers too, if you had an answer to that question. My answer was, well, the teachers need to do the research, right? Like, make a historic or a cultural connection for your students in that space. And like I just said, right, encourage your students to be curious about where the dance forms come from. The teacher should also participate in the cultures and the communities connected to the style. I feel like that's a way dance teachers can improve on teaching the dance culture and the history to the students. Do any of the other speakers have a sort of idea on that they would want to share?
I want to add to that with like, just thinking about how there's this staples saying in hip hop where we say always a student, never a master.
Well, there you go.
And also have been in discussions about, you know, asking oneself because it's going back to that question, how much do I need to learn of this technique before I can teach it? It's like, or also questions like, how much do I need to do? How much do I need to learn to consider myself an ally? How much do I need to prove myself to be an ally? And then going back to the whole student thing, is that asking like those type of questions, I feel does give or make it into a point form where you it almost makes you think like there's an end to it, but there isn't. And how learning is always, it's a journey, and it's a journey till the end, and we never are really done learning. And even having a conversation with my mentor, Venom, he was just talking about how you show the narrative to your students is important. For example, am I teaching hip hop in a lens of, I am sharing this because this is what I learned from my mentors and we are learning together? Or am I talking about hip hop like I created it or something, you know? Or that there's a certain point you reach until you're done, but the thing is you're never actually done. So I guess with saying this, I just wanted to let people ponder on that, on what it means to learn and immerse yourself in something, that it is a commitment to have it be a part of your life, whether that's listening to the music of the people, talking to the people, having conversation with and about the people. And for hip hop teachers or hip hop enthusiasts in this panel or listening to this, I hope that you really seek out knowledge. I hope you seek out resources, stories, because all of the knowledge that come from these street dances are stories passed down. And as dancers, we are storytellers. And as teachers, we are passing down the stories. So for me, for teachers to, I guess, be better is to really find our own truth with the stories that we tell.
Yeah, that's facts. Like, that's amazing. To kind of bounce off you and Sabrina have been talking about, first of all, I just want to thank you, Sabrina, for just, again, beautifully explaining and talking about many different points that I think kind of crossed over through all the 5 genres and general topics that we were talking about, as well as Sophia, the amazing points that you brought in too. And I think to kind of bring out the value that I was getting out of what you guys were saying, the things that were constantly popping up in my head, and that I was even about to mention in what I was going to say, is that we kind of get to see that the separation that's happening is between the people and the actual dance. A lot of the times we forget that those aren't 2 different things. The dance, which we like to refer to as the culture, directly reflects to the people. So when you're talking about dancers being better, or students being better, or teachers being better, we have to talk about the relationship and what that intention is. Is the intention to solely focus on the dance and the arbitrary goals that come with that? Or is the intention to understand people and to appreciate people and to appreciate the stories of those people? Because as Sophia was saying, when you're looking at culture, the word itself tells you what it is and what it means. I've been finding in a lot of these discussions, and Sabrina, we've been on a few together and like listening into a few together. So the thing I've been hearing a lot is the strength and the power in words, yeah, and the strength in the strength that we put to those words. Sorry. So when we're utilizing a word like culture and we're putting that onto dance and speaking about culture and saying appreciate the culture, appropriation of culture, how do I dive into culture? I think we're starting to really step away from what culture is, and that's again stories from ancestors. So ancestors, people that have come way, way before us, were responsible for establishing what was of value. So what was important to their people, to their community, what those groups value. And if you look at different communities and different cultures, those values are going to change. And that's diversity. Diversity is the the differences within the similarity. Yes, so you have diversity within different groups, but the values are still there. The values are going to be different, but the values are going to be present. And the ancestors establish what things are going to be passed down to the next generation, whether it be for survival, whether it be for expression, whether it be to just pass time and to have fun or to celebrate something. But those values are passed down tradition, generation to generation to generation to generation, until we're now able to enjoy those things or even witness those things or see those things. So again, when you are talking about culture, when we're talking about culture, we can never step away from the fact that we're talking about people. This whole conversation is only understanding etiquette with people, understanding how to live with people, understanding how to appreciate people. When we're talking, like I'm looking at the hip hop questions that were there, and there were a lot of amazing questions, but I don't want to my brain wants to segue into that, but I want to stay where we're at. With teaching, the relationship here the conversation here is really talking about, okay, what is your goal? Yeah, that intention. What is your goal? Are you trying to amplify a voice? Are you trying to uplift a voice? Are you trying to encourage in a situation, encourage an environment, encourage a reality? Or is it something that's purely for your own happiness and your own expression? Because then if that's the case, then your position is to be a dancer or someone who purely just studies dance for the sake of it. But as soon as you're in the position of teaching, you now put yourself in the position of passing on this story, of passing on this tradition, of continuing on this these values that these ancestors have had. So it again doesn't become about us anymore. It isn't about you. You are a servant in that position. You are serving others. You're facilitating a student's connection to this journey. You're facilitating them understanding how to get to that point where they also fall in love with you, with what you originally fell in love with, what got you to want to share this amazing story. Yeah. Because it's the same thing. If we're going to take this whole aspect and bring it to spirituality, it's the same concept. Or if you're bringing it to religion, it's the same concept. Even if you bring it to your diet, like I went pescatarian for like 2 weeks and I just wanted to tell everybody because I was excited because it's something that I valued. I'm like, yo, listen, like I only eat fish now. Like no one cares, but I was excited. I wanted to share that. And that's normal, right? Those things are normal. So it's really understanding the position that you're taking and why you want to take that position, and understanding the value of that position, understanding the responsibility behind that. So when we're having these conversations, I think when we have that in focus, for me at least, and a lot of the people I've been talking with, it makes it a lot easier to maneuver. When we're separating dance and people, then that's where the gray starts to come in. And that's why I really appreciated how you talked about it, Sabrina, acknowledging all the parents, yeah, acknowledging everyone responsible. It's the same in hip hop, Caribbean culture, African culture, Latinx culture, like it's involving and including all the parents, because that's where you start to find the gems in why the culture is a certain way, because it was why the people were a certain way and why they lived a certain way. Sorry, that was a long answer.
There it is. There it is. I think that's fantastic. Yes, I'm so happy we're recording this. That's so good. Yeah, I'm wondering if any of the other panelists have anything to say to that.
Yeah, Clement and Serge, you guys can unmute if you guys want to add.
Yeah. No, it's a first time being on a panel like this, so I guess it's evident because AJ, Sabrina, you guys are going at it. And we're learning a lot, which is the whole process that we've discovered as we entered this space of sharing and teaching, is that there's a lot to learn. And there's a lot that has already been mentioned, intentionality, background, history, being inquisitive, in like your intentions. I think that's the biggest thing that every time, like when we met with Serge in first year, personally growing up back in Kenya, we didn't have the resources to go to schools for dance school. So when all we did back in Kenya was, like social dancing, people would come with dance moves, we would share those dance moves. And that's how we got to pass on like different dances, right? I didn't go to a structured place and have like an instructor telling us 1, 2, like counts. Those are things that I had to learn here when we met and we decided, what, I think where we come from, like what we've been experiencing where we're from, it would be great to share it with people like around UBC. That's how we started. So we had to learn, oh, there's counts. Oh, there's, you know, like students who ask questions about, oh, who created this move? Because that's something I've never, like back home, it's never like, oh, who created this move? It's, you know, you dance it and you appreciate the move, and it's passed on in that sense. But as trying to teach and trying to share this, we learned a few things on, it's good to know who created this, just so that the students can know who created this, just so the students can understand the importance of doing it or why it was done, because that is not something that we thought about too much, you know, in the environment that we came from. But the only thing that I would add to what has been said is that when you're teaching and sharing, the environment you're in is a big factor as well. So like, I'm not sure how it is in Calgary, but in Vancouver, like trying to teach dancehall and Afrobeats, trying to share it, I would say, it's not very welcoming in a sense. Like, you know, we were hosting free classes, like just not even like free classes, just like, you know, like we have this, we just want to show you how awesome this dance styles is, you know, this is a location we've booked, just come up, let's show you, let's dance together, right? And the reception is different. Like even the teachers teaching the same dance style in your area can affect how you perceive like the teaching and the sharing in that aspect. Because in Vancouver, it's not very connected. So the teachers who are teaching, like when we were in UBC, it was very hard to we didn't know anyone else teaching outside UBC. And no one else outside UBC would reach out to us and be like, hey, you guys are trying to do this and I do this. I've been here longer than you. Why don't you come and let me show you how I like my experiences, right? So I think the area you're in also affects how knowledge is passed on. And that's something that I think students and teachers also should be aware of is, oh, what are the trends in my area? Like how is the teaching affecting my area? Because I'm pretty sure if you go to Calgary, if you go to Toronto, it's very different. And the sharing there is so different from the sharing here. And I think that's something that maybe we can add to the conversation.
But Clement, I think that you realizing that is improvement on its own. I think you being aware that you need to learn more in order to pass on more, I don't think that you should change that. Or I don't think, you know, because when I met you, and I know I've had conversations with you about classes, monetizing classes, and you telling me about free classes, and it actually makes me think how you and Serge are like really the epitome of teachers wanting to teach purely because you want to share what you love to do. And you realizing that you need more knowledge is beautiful. And I think every teacher should have that type of realization and reflection. I think also teachers need to reflect all the time. And it goes back to this video I was watching of Henry Link, a hip hop OG and pioneer. And he was mentioning about this student who really wanted to learn from him. And he said, well, before I teach you, I need to ask you why you want to learn from me. And he asked, like, how much do you love to dance? And then the person was like, well, I don't know. And Link was like, well, if there was no cameras, if there was no Instagram, if there was no TikTok, if there was no, you know, media, would you still dance? And the person says, maybe not as much. And that's when Link said, well, I can't teach you. Mm-hmm. And it goes back to intentionality. Will you teach if there was no such thing as TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, social media, monetization? And you were already doing that. You were teaching for the love of teaching, and you recognizing that you need more knowledge, you're already a better teacher. I just wanted to add that.
Hello. I just wanted to add something off a little bit as well. Can everybody hear me okay? This is the first time turning on. Okay, cool. So just to touch on a few things that have been said before and my own experience with Clement coming up with Sinbirds and exploring and wanting to teach, I think the biggest thing we pulled from that is like your integrity as an artist and as a dancer. Like if I'm in a dance class, I'm trying to teach. I know this step. I feel like I've been doing it since I was a kid. And a student asks me a question like, hey, what's this step called? Where is it from? Who invented it? What's the history behind it? Doesn't matter how many years I've been doing that step. If I don't know all that information, the most important thing is to acknowledge that I do not know and refer them with resources. I think a big mistake some instructors can make sometimes is to dismiss it and say, hey, no, don't focus on that. Focus on what I'm telling you. Focus on making it look right so I appreciate it. And I think that's a very bad way to go. So it comes down to your integrity. So I would encourage all instructors here and teachers, if doesn't matter if you've been teaching for 10 years, 3 years, 2 years, doesn't matter. As everybody has acknowledged here, like we're always learning, even as teachers. So if you are met with something like that, and that's something Clement and I have learned, it's never, your first reaction should never be to dismiss that and be like, no. It's always good to acknowledge, hey, you know what? I don't know. Here's some resources I think we can use to figure that out. Here's some steps we can use to both learn from this experience, from this great question you just asked. So yeah, that'll be my take on that. Thanks.
Yo, Serge, I 100% agree with that. And to kind of, I love that you mentioned that, because not only is that integrity, but it's also bringing the value to the styles. It's bringing the value to the genre, to actually sit there as a practitioner, like not just pontificating, not just speaking of these things to your students and being like, you need to do this research, but as a practitioner, so as someone who's actively practicing, to be like, hey, I don't know this, and let me actually look into that so I can come back to you. And I've had experiences where I've had a lot of people in this time recently reaching out with questions, and I love to answer those questions. And there's been times where I'm like, I legitimately don't know this. One of my homies wanted to choreograph a piece, and he's like, hey, I've been doing this step for so long, but I actually want to know a little more about it, like before I just utilize it. Like I already have it in my choreography. And I was like, hey man, I don't know. And I went up for teaching on a weekend to Edmonton. And one of my mentors, as I was with him, because he was hosting me, and we were just vibing and chatting, we ended up talking about that same movement. And he gave me much more history on it than what I even wanted to know. Like I just wanted to know the name of the movement to remember. But he gave me the origins and the stories and the people involved. And it even connected dots for me that I had from other movements. And in that moment, it was just like a reminder of what it is to actually just be on that journey for the sake of enjoying it, of actually appreciating it, of wanting to know more. Because now I'm in a space now where I not only have that information of going back to my students saying, hey, I actually know what this step is, but now I can give you even more information, and this is who it comes from. So if you want to look more into that, now you can go and do your own research and explore. And that's how we start to develop that inspiration for students to be curious, right? Instead of just like, again, as you were saying, start shying away from that moment, or being like, okay, you guys know this groove? I feel like that's every choreographer's, like I've probably been guilty of that in like my first few years of teaching. Like it's every choreographer's favorite thing when it comes to groove. Just mentioning, hey, you know this groove? Yeah, we're gonna do that groove. We're gonna do that groove. But when it comes to lines, when it comes to timing, then the description is impeccable. Like we're talking about like degrees, and we're talking about like angles, and we're talking about flex, and we're talking about stance. But when it comes to the groove, when it comes to that cultural aspect, we're dismissing it completely. And again, like that honesty with yourself as a teacher comes back to, what is the purpose of you doing it? Are you trying to seem like someone who knows everything? Or are you also someone who's, like Sophia said, still on that journey, still on that ongoing journey? And again, bringing value to it by acknowledging that there's more to learn, and it's exciting to learn more of that. I actually kind of have a question just for the host. I think, like, just as I'm looking at the time, like, are there some of the questions from the list that were really speaking to you guys, or that you really wanted answered, that we can kind of like fire back between the speakers and kind of go about it that way? Because I feel like right now we're like fired up, and we're
all going off right now.
Well, this is our first time doing this, and it seems like it's going really well.
It is. I think there's a lot of value. Like I'm gaining so much value from the other speakers. So I feel like for everyone, it's going to be a good time to like get those things going and like just pick the wins. So if that's cool with you guys.
Yeah, we're happy for this to keep going like this, and unless there's anything where you guys run out of things to say, but I highly doubt that. There's so much knowledge and such a wealth of information coming forward, so keep going.
We could get into some of the general questions. That will make
Yeah.
sure we get all the speakers still.
Yes.
Yeah, I have them pulled up already.
This was already brought up in like the jazz section, but I'll ask it again. I mean, this was already what you guys were talking about. The question is, what are your thoughts on the commercialization of dance? And we got all of you guys saying it's more about intentionality, and that really made me reflect, because I do know it's like some of the people that you guys mentioned that are like, how many of these classes do I need to take before I'm teaching? And I used to be like that, so that is some nice self-reflection to have there. Let's see, what else did we have?
And also, I want to speak on students. I'm sure there are so many students listening to this right now, and
yes,
also inviting and encouraging you to challenge your teachers, challenge the knowledge that's being fed to you, and don't just settle with whatever people are feeding you. Ask them when, where, why, how. That's how you become a better student and a better teacher. I mean, for me personally, I think.
Thank you, Sophia.
Yeah, I would say as dance teachers, like, let's start to change the culture of dance and dance education. Like, let's if you find yourself in a teaching position, why don't we create this sort of fascination around like dance is a growing form. It's something that is ever evolving. How exciting. Dialogue and dance should be almost parallel to each other, and dialogue is a circular thing. You ask me a question, I ask you a question. Sometimes dance can be really like teacher student, I tell you, you go. But I think now as teachers in this era, I think it's a special time. Like, we should change those dynamics in class, right? Because art, if we like it or not, like, it's gonna be here after we die, you know? So how can we be these vessels that move through art, take, pass through, share, keep going? I think we should also try that as dance teachers. That's something I'd add.
We're in a situation where all of our panelists actually are people of color, and one of the general questions we had here was, do you think that there's racism present in casting or audition processes, and how does that affect the result of what's presented on stage and in the media? So whoever wants to jump in on that first.
I know, I just, hearing that question, there were a few things that popped up for me, and I'll kind of just mention that, and then there's probably another speaker who could better address the question also. But in hearing that, there's like two things that go on in my mind. I think in the time that we're in right now, a lot of agencies or a lot of these corporations are trying to cover themselves by hiring and by making sure that they're covering those spaces. So I think that not that energy is wasted, but a lot of that energy for me goes towards the typecasting, or like specifically what people are being casted for, and that kind of conversation, because I know there's a lot of just toxic and a really toxic environment that's created there. But I also want to say that for me, I feel like the big issue is the representation within positions of teaching, because I feel like this question is really about representation, and I feel like a really, really big part of that for the culture to be maintained, or the dance styles to be maintained, is so that there's correct representations within studios or within people that are in those positions of hiring or of setting what the culture is, or setting what the standard is. I think there should be a look at that too, because these things are going to change in terms of who's getting hired, yes, but for the kids to have the correct information, or for the people that are performing or being hired to have the correct execution or value the correct information, the people that are, again, in those positions of power need to have there needs to be a switch, or again, the intention needs to be changed. And I think that's what I would throw on that as I was reading that question.
Dope. I wrote a little blurb to that, so I'm going to share that. That's a very interesting question, by the way. So some thoughts that came up for me was, from a choreographer, from a producing point of view, I think it's really important to look at the character description first. An example I could bring up is like Ariel, look at the chaos around Ariel. Whoa. This is like a character like Ariel, fictional, right? It's open to any race. So it's interesting how there was so much drama around that, because we were never introduced that Ariel was a certain race. It was just a character that came up. So why not play around with what race that character is? That's a thought that popped into my mind when I read this question. But then, for instance, biopics, like there you must honor the main character, the protagonist, and you must cast accordingly. What I thought was really interesting is the Nina Simone biopic, right? I had to ask myself, well, what resources did those filmmakers, directors have? What was it? Was it about budget? Was it about access to actors? Why did a Zoe Saldana play Nina Simone? Why not Viola Davis or Fantasia Barrino? Like, I don't want to think that it's like because of racism or shadeism or colorism that things went the way they did in those two movies, or in the response to those two movies, but ultimately character description, like it's kind of right there. It's kind of laid out for you. Casting or not casting a certain dancer for a certain role because of his or her race, what is the role? And if the role is the bad guy, ask yourself, why does the bad guy need to look this way or not look this way? Check in with your biases as a casting director, as a writer, right? I think that's something that needs to be looked at. By the way, the Nina Simone biopic was a thing. It did happen. It continued. I was very surprised that they still went on with that project. But anyways, so I would actually just pose that question more to the people who are producing art. And why are you creating and writing these roles in this way? Check in with your biases.
Also, I want to add another thing to ponder on. Mm-hmm. I was thinking about representation the other day, and it made me think about High School Musical. How Vanessa Hudgens, who is half Filipino, was casted as, is it a Mexican or Puerto Rican family? I think so, one of those in High School Musical. And to me, the biggest question was, why didn't they just make it a half Filipino family? I don't understand why she was a Filipino artist, actress that was pretending to be another race. Why couldn't they hire a race that maybe from that, if they were trying to find a Mexican family or a Puerto Rican family, or, but then it's like one of those questions that I have in my head. It's like, why are they casting certain races to play other races? And is there racism when it comes to auditions and casting and all of that? Do you think there is? Because me, let me tell you, when I was growing up in dance, I always walked into audition knowing that no matter how hard I dance, no matter if I knew I was the best dancer in that room, I know that the chances of me getting casted is slim because I am a dark skinned Asian girl. Unless I'm cookie cutter, they're not gonna book me. Or unless I am white passing, they're not gonna book me. And for me, these are not opinions, this is my experience. Whether do I think there's racism or not, I mean, I've definitely experienced the opposite of inclusivity, that's for sure. And then, yeah, thinking about the representation even on TV, where I look at somebody like, oh my God, she's half Filipino, that's so cool. Oh, wait, they said she's Mexican over there. Like, that's weird. And yeah, just that whole experience. I don't know what that tells you about the casting audition system, but there's definitely some sort of discrimination going on there.
Yeah, if I can add something to that. I think when we're looking at casting and representation, the question can sometimes get a little bit complex and even go the other way in that sometimes, you know, it might be that I'm scrolling on Instagram and I see a person from another race doing Afrobeats, doing dancehall, and I'm like, yo, that's actually very impressive. And I'm much quicker to repost that and reshare that with Clement to be like, yo, check this out, as opposed to if I saw somebody from the culture doing it, right? And I have to question myself, like, why do I do that, right? And would we consider racism if they, I'm not talking about specifically your case, Sophia, but I'm thinking like, would I consider racism if I was cast in a role just because I'm Black, even if the role had nothing to do with the character being Black or behaving in any Black way? Like, how do we find that balance between, oh, you know, maybe I would have gotten this if I was another race, to, and then comparing it to our own experiences where, you know, sometimes you find artists from our own continent, like, you know, resharing stuff because, you know, another race, a different group of people is doing it, but that same work that you do, being from the same place they are, does not get the same spotlight.
Thank you so much for those answers. Clement, did you want to add anything?
No.
Okay. Well, thank you for responding to that question. The next question I picked out is a hip hop question. So for the people with experience in hip hop, it has to do with when we are teaching or learning hip hop dance, the slight change of vocabulary people might have, what might be considered African American vernacular English or a Black accent, perhaps telling people to really get into their ghetto or ratchet side, these kind of words that are kind of detrimental to the Black community. Was wondering what your opinions were on that.
I love that question. I love that question so much. And the reason why is because being a hip hop teacher in Cowtown, Calgary, Alberta, what was really interesting was that as I started to teach in more studios and working with more like competitive based studios, and really all I was doing was carrying the knowledge that I got from my mentors and my teachers, but the teacher before me maybe just had a focus on choreography. So there I was coming in with, okay, well, let's learn some of these grooves that I know, let's train these steps, and let's like expand so that we can get better at the choreography, which kind of just made sense. But it became this whole idea that like, because of how I look and because of how I am, that I was a representation of like, oh, that this must be true because you certainly look the part. And what I started to notice within the studios for the first time was how much there was this sort of weird like personification, or like, I don't want to reach and say mockery, but costuming and like playing on the fact that hip hop culture is like, it's a character. You know, you have like the little 9-year-old girl with like the sideways hat and she's doing like her hip hop pose, and like, you got to wear your clothes like this and baggy like this, and like, that's hip hop. And like, they're kind of just making it a caricature. And if you start to look at history and how Black Americans have been treated and how Black culture has been treated and how that's been poked at within media and within culture, then that starts to be a scary repetition. Yes, where you're starting to see this whole ideal that's depicted usually in a negative way. Because when you think about a ballet dancer, the thought process that you have is elegance. It's like elongated, it's proper, it's defined, it's there's again these words that come into mind that have a lot of power, and not taking away from that, because that is very much a character that those dancers hold. But when you look at hip hop dance, again, those words that are used are derogatory, are demeaning. It is this whole idea of like, this is a joke, this is for fun, so we don't need to care about it per se. So I would say that that is really interesting, and that again goes back to your place within the culture. Are you a guest to the culture, and what does that mean to be a guest within a culture? And to kind of touch on what was said earlier, that was a really, really good point, is that as a Black person, I can also be a guest to culture. Just because I'm Black does not mean that I inherently am a part of hip hop culture. I was not born in New York, Sedgwick, like 1950. Like I wasn't born there. I wasn't there. I wasn't around. I just met those dudes maybe 6-7 years ago. You know what I mean? Like I wasn't there. And even if you're thinking about Afro culture, it's the same thing. Like I was growing through it. Like I wasn't there in its conception. I am also a guest. But what the difference is here is that a lot of these things are reminders, because these are cultures that I have associated with or I've been a part of. It's a lot easier to understand a culture if you have been a part of a culture, because it goes back to the first point I made of understanding of value, like understanding what it is to value something. And a question that I like to ask my students a lot is, what do you value? Like, what do you care about? Like, what is a family tradition that you and your family do every single year? And like, when you guys don't do that, like, you know that it's coming up, you're like excited. You're like, oh, it's been a while since we've done that thing. Or every year it's a dinner or a celebration or a holiday, because that's something that you value. That's a part of who you are, right? And what you stand on. So when you're able to identify that, then you're able to see values within other people. As simple as a child having a favorite toy and then growing up and seeing another kid with his favorite toy or her favorite toy. And you're like, oh, yeah, I understand why they would value that toy. I have also valued something in my life. So when you're looking at people that are putting on this character or this accent or this voice, it's coming from a place of not knowing what you're standing on, of not knowing what you're speaking on per se, understanding like your foundation or what you're grounded on. I love how Venom mentioned this, and Sophia, you mentioned Venom. One of a really, really dope teacher in the city, really dope mentor in Vancouver as well. And he talks about being grounded in a very, very beautiful way, but it's not about your stance or like having a wide second, you know what I mean? It's about what you're standing on. Like, what values are you standing on? What are you trying to teach? What are you trying to bring across? So I would actually say that in terms of addressing that problem, I would actually invite people to calling those things out. Like, I've had a student take a class where the teacher was saying, okay, for this part, since we're going to be throwing our hair and dancing a little more energetic, or maybe grooving with different points of our body, I'm going to refer to it as being ratchet. So I want you guys to be ratchet on this part because we're dancing a certain way. And she was wondering, like, why would you refer to it as being ratchet? Like, what does that mean? What does it mean to be ratchet? Because I'm seeing movements that are twerking movements, which actually has history and has background. You could actually break it down into dance hall, but there's also culture within Miami scene, within the Florida scene. So like, well, what are you getting to? So it's really the point of actually questioning those teachers and having those conversations, because a lot of these things that are said because people don't understand, again, that it's a connection to the people. It's not just a dance. It's not just let's be ratchet for this part. You are now talking about a people, and you're categorizing that group of people, and you're taking an experience that you do not understand and labeling it a certain way. The same reason that when I share Ndombolo within my Afrofusion classes, I need to tell students that we're moving our hips because this is a celebration of life, and the circle of life is a representation of the womb, and the womb represents life. So that ongoing life, we are praising it as we're dancing. I'm not moving my hips to be sexual. I'm not moving my hips to have
a certain idea, or for you to attach a certain fetish onto how I'm moving. I'm doing it because of my connection to life and my connection to celebration and how I move to music. So I would invite both teachers and students that are in these classes and in these spaces to have those conversations and to actually audit people on what they're saying in class.
Thank you so much for that, AJ. Does anyone want to add on?
I want to say, please ask them their intentions. Again, going back, just because like, when I read this question, I was like, what is this? A black scent? Because I read this question, it says, why do you think people changed their speech pattern to a black scent for hip hop and not for ballet or jazz? Actually, also interesting question. One, I would say also as a non-black person practicing hip hop, I didn't really understand the need for it. There's no need for it. There's no need for you to use ebonics unless you have been immersed in the culture where you do that every day and you speak that every day. But in the most humble, kind way, please don't do it. Don't do it, guys. And also, even adding to what AJ said, like, please audit them, call them out. And calling out people doesn't have to be aggressive or, confrontations don't need to be aggressive. They can just be conversations. They can just be question and answers. They can just be exactly like this panel. For example, I watched this dancer on Instagram, who I will not name, and they were doing these like dance challenges. And one of the challenges was like, dance as if you just got out of prison. And this person started playing hip hop music, doing hip hop looking moves. And I immediately messaged that person. I said, one, why do you associate that music and that step with that word, with that prompt? What narrative have you created or fed in your mind that made you instantly think that that's the first urge your body wants to make when you hear that word? Why? And I swear I typed like a 4-paragraph, like, why this, why that? And don't be afraid to ask those questions, because it'll make them do the research. It'll make them look up why that is, how society has, yes, check your bias, how society has created biases, even especially within dance and music, towards the people that created it.
Wow. Thank you so much. That's kind of crazy. Does anyone have anything else to add on this question about hip hop for other speakers? Sophia, question for you in the chat.
Oh, what question? Where is it? Oh my God.
It says, it's from Serge, the other panelist. It says, quick question for that dance challenge. What would have been an accurate way of doing it?
I don't know. If somebody told me dance like you got out of prison, I would dance happy as hell. Hell yeah, I'm free. I'm out of this box. Like, not hip hop. What? If somebody told me dance confident, yeah.
They got locked up. They won't let, like, I don't know.
I don't know, like something else. Like, if somebody told you just got out of prison like that, I would be dancing, happy, jumping up and down, doing jumping jacks. Like, hell yeah, I'm free. But the choice of music and the choice of dance and the choice of intention and the choice of imagery, why? Where did it come from? And
I will definitely, yes, I will definitely, I just want to highlight in bold, like, intention. Because ultimately, if you're out of prison and you're so happy and your go-to happy dance is like a hip hop track and a hip hop way, then please, like, do that. If your intention is like, I equate, okay, I'm out of prison, I'm happy, and I equate happiness to hip hop, then that's so beautiful, right? Your intention is clear. If the intention is skewed in the sense that, prison, hip hop, negativity, then okay, now we have to sit and we have to talk and we have to like question the biases there. But I love how you put that, Sophia. Definitely, like, intention matters. Intention is everything. If you don't have intention, you have nothing. So.
And if you guys wanted to know what the person responded, they actually did their research and said, you know, thank you for letting me know. Thank you for asking me these questions. Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah, I would also add to that, because I love that you mentioned that last little spiel, Sophia. Impact over intention sometimes, right? Because sometimes you can have the right intention, but someone might still perceive that, or a group of people might perceive that to still not sit right with their values. And for someone to speak up on their pain and how they're feeling, if your intentions were honestly true, then in that moment would be a learning moment for you to build off of that, not to meet it with confrontation and be like, well, no, like, this is what like, because then your intentions are now clear. You weren't willing to actually change. You were willing to know about this other person and how they would feel. And I think thinking about that process is really important too. And it just allows you to just be willing for change and willing to hear another side and willing to adapt. Right. So I think like that's a big thing too, because you can have the right intention. Like, I've spoken to people where they're like, well, I did this video and I wanted to support BLM, and now people are telling me I was centering it around me, but I'm telling you that the intention was this. And I'm like, okay, well, this is the impact. So now how can we build from this? Or are you stuck on the impact because it wasn't favorable to you? So now there's an issue. Now there's a confrontation. You don't want to grow from that. So very much thinking about that impact with the intention and learning, right? Like, I think in this time, we're seeing a lot of things come to the surface, and we're having a lot of different discussions. Like right now we're talking about culture and we're talking about appreciation, but there's been discussion about sexual misconduct. There's been discussion about transgender people who identify within the LGBTQ community. There's been conversation about indigenous lives. There's been a lot of different environmental conversations. And it's just really, really a time where a lot of things are being talked about. And I think it's a great way to, again, check your bias and to learn new things and to adapt with the times, as opposed to wanting to stick to values that no longer serve you, if that makes sense. So I think it's just a great time to hear things and to change and to have positive conversations.
Yeah.
And also, oh, sorry, go ahead. I feel like I'm talking so much. I'm so sorry, guys.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll be quick. I just think that, like, this conversation, if you put it like hip hop, dancehall, Afrobeats, jazz, all the dance styles that you can think of. One of our fascinations was that we really liked dance videos, and we really like being in front of the camera and reaching people that way. So I think one of the ways we've been trying to challenge how people view dancehall and Afrobeats is how we represent it in the visuals that we put out. And this goes to all the teachers and students as well. If you're taking classes, or if you're choreographing a piece for yourself to do, I see a lot of people shooting videos and just putting them on their page. I think it speaks volumes on how you represent yourself doing a certain dance style. Because we did a video for Black History Month, and we were wearing like on our shoes, we're wearing like regular stuff, like hype shoes, whatever you call them. But on top, we were shirtless, and we had paint on our body. And that was a way of showing that, like, there's a perceived way of how, like, Africans look like when they're dancing, and there's a way of representing it. So with hip hop and trying to paint it in a different color, I think it's onto us. When you see that, when someone does a challenge in like dance, like you're coming out of prison, when you do that dance video, it's on you to make sure that you're sending the right message, and you're kind of like blocking all other avenues that people would think you're associating prison to hip hop, but they would think, oh, you are associating happiness to hip hop. So I think how we represent ourselves and how we represent those dance styles in the visuals we put out, I think it's on us to kind of shape the image we're putting out there.
Thank you, Clement. Sophia, did you want to add?
Oh yeah, sorry, one last thing. Going back to what AJ was saying about the movement of the hips even, and how people call that, can call that ratchet, or I don't know. But it was making me think of how women in hip hop are so emasculated when the way they use their body in hip hop dance, because in hip hop dance, in Vancouver, I don't really see female hip hop dancers use their hips at all, because of maybe it's the fear of being sexualized, overly sexualized, and even maybe the way knowledge has been passed on to female students when it comes to learning dance, and how much we have been restricted to use that area, where it's creation. And I say this because like I've experienced so many ciphers and battles where I don't think people really understood when I did it, because like in hip hop, my hip hop is mixed a lot with dance hall, and I mean, Jamaica gave birth to hip hop, so it makes sense. But there's this weird thing that they associate with the hips and ratchetness or twerking. When you think about it, really, like, there is so much power to it, but yet women, for some reason, we are so restricted, or it looks to me as if we're so restricted on using those tools. And it makes me wonder if it's because of those connotations, that using your hips, like shaking your ass, like the associations of the movement into words that aren't maybe accepted, like the word ratchet, and how it associates with something that's not clean or not proper or not, tidy. But yeah, I guess I just wanted to give the women who are going to or in hip hop that, what am I trying to say? Embrace more being a woman. Embrace being women in hip hop, and don't just try to dance all like masculine, because the root of it all, like, there's so much women influence in street dance. So that's just something that I wanted to share.
Thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah.
That's a very important perspective to look at. We do have about 10 minutes left. So I did want to open the floor to the audience if they wanted to put any questions in the chat. But while we wait for them to put questions in the chat, AJ, you look like you want to add something on.
I just really appreciated what Sophia was saying and what she was talking about, and just kind of a tidbit of history that might be helpful is, even when you dive in deeper to Congolese culture, so in the Congo, what was happening there is within Africa, there's a division in terms of religion, right? Like there's like Muslim Africa and then Catholic, Christian Africa. And as the colonizers were not only leaving their religions and their beliefs onto the people, what started happening in my country was that they associated their own base of movement with demonic ideals. So they were made to believe now that they were Protestant, which is like a lot of what a lot of Congolese people are, Protestant, within their culture, because of the colonizers that had gone there and that were spreading their religion and their beliefs. They made the people believe that, okay, since we're a part of this religion now, this movement is demonic. We can't dance like this, which created a separation within the people. There was a whole generation of people that had believed that this movement that they had done for centuries was now something that was evil. And something that's really important to remember, which again goes with what Sophia was saying in terms of like dancing how you want to dance. The first movement you do as a child, as like a toddler, is to bounce. Like, is to bounce. You're moving your knees, but that's your bum. Like, that's your bum, like moving. Like, that's your groove, that's your bounce. And that comes in French, on dit bassin. Like, that's your hips, that's your waist. So like, these are natural movements again, but throughout culture, we've seen throughout history, we've seen time and time again that when something isn't understood, it is demonized. So these groups of people, how they live, we don't understand it. They are now a group of people that are uncivilized. They have yet to become civilized because we don't understand their way of living. We don't understand their values. So therefore, since it's different, it is this ideal that we're going to place on it. And I think once you do the research, once you really attach yourself to the roots of those dances, then those things reveal themselves to you, and you can find that freedom in your expression. So I really appreciated you mentioning that, Sophia, because it's a really, really big point. Dance freely, and be grounded in your dance. Feel safe.
Thank you so much. Oh, sorry.
No, you're good.
Who's speaking there, Serge? Go ahead.
Yeah, what I wanted to add basically touches on what Clement had mentioned earlier in terms of the Vancouver dance scene being a little bit different. We've talked a lot tonight about being comfortable enough to call somebody out and let them know, like, hey, what is your intention behind this? What is your intention behind that? So I'm speaking on this strictly in terms of Vancouver. I'm sure Calgary might be a little bit different, but I think it's on us to basically develop these relationships within the community, because we call it a community. We say this, this, and that, but do we actually know these people? Are we interacting with them? And if you don't have that, then how are you then gonna stand from somebody who maybe has never spoken to you before, coming up to you and being like, hey, why are you doing this? What's up with that? How do you do this? Who gives you the right to do this, right? So I think before we give ourselves that power to stand and call people out, let's develop a relationship with them. Because a lot of the things that we were so ready to call them out on, we would dismiss, did we know who they actually are and what they actually stand for. So yeah, this is just strictly about Vancouver. I've heard great things about Calgary and Toronto and them, but again, that's just a position of an outsider. But yeah, that's what I do have to say about us.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Serge. That's definitely a really good point about like context, right? And understanding your relationship to somebody else when you're going to go through the questioning and understanding where they're coming from. I just wanted to, I had an anonymous question, not to derail the conversation. I love everything that's going on here. I just had somebody who sent a question that they wanted to ask, so I'm going to pose that to the panel. I know we talked, rolling back, I know we talked quite a bit at the beginning about sort of the monetization of dance. And so this person was wondering, how do you find a balance if you're, especially a sharer or a teacher in the community, to ensure that the value of your craft doesn't become undervalued? Especially given COVID, right? Like, a lot of people are under financial strain. So the expectation of giving, I think what they're getting at is the expectation of giving your resources and your knowledge and your craft for free or for less than what you put into it. I hope that is the correct interpretation. But yeah, it was, how do you ensure that the value of your craft doesn't become undervalued, like lowering the cost just for the sake of sharing, which is great, but there's those practical needs too. So I don't know if panel had anything thoughts on that.
I think that's a really interesting question, because it is a very, very hard time right now. So I think even speaking on this, you have to really be sensitive to an understanding of people's situations, and just financially and health-wise. I would say that a good strategy in general is to share and to give, because that is what gets people to fall in love with something, or to interact with something, or to get a chance to experience something. And I would also ask this person if their goal internally is to be financially stable off of dance specifically, or if their goal is to continue enjoying teaching. Like, those are two different things in this time. And the reason I say that is, if your goal is to make yourself financially stable off of dance, then this is a weird time where you do have to produce a lot more, because the accessibility has completely changed. I can take a class from anywhere, from anyone, anywhere in the world, realistically, if it's on Zoom, because of how things are right now. So it just changes the information, and it just changes, or the access to information. But in terms of valuing what you have, and in terms of like honoring what you have, if you aren't willing to share and to give that out, then it makes it a little bit hard for you to get people to be interested and to want that. So I would say it really comes from a place of like what you want to do. Like, there's some things that I would love to share within dance, but I keep that sacred and just for me. Like, I just want to continue training those styles or those genres. And then there's things that I do teach because I want to use that to be able to share, or to again make ends meet financially. But in the time that we're in right now, it is very much sharing with people and letting them get into it. And then those people that are enjoying and that are really finding a liking to your values and how you're teaching, then you're using that to develop a program that you're teaching, or getting them to subscribe to a class. But yeah, it does start with giving a little bit of a lot for free. And I know that can be a problem when you value something, because again, it's your authenticity and your integrity. So I would just say that if that's the conversation, if you're already having that mental divide, then maybe it's not something that you should be sharing in the first place. Maybe you should be sharing like something different, you know what I mean? Like another style that you're well trained in. But if you're already thinking about it like that, then it's clear that it's not the time to do so. To kind of connect some questions too as we finish off, I saw some really good questions of like, why do you teach Afro? Why do you teach hip hop? Like, why do you teach dance hall, I'm assuming? And like, why do you share these styles? I think that's a beautiful question, because me personally, being a Congolese man and teaching Afrofusion, where I'm picking off of the African styles that I train consistently, I wouldn't teach a Congolese dance class by myself, by any question, or purely because that's something that I value and that is close to my heart. It took me 8 years to even be comfortable teaching this style because of how I grew up with it, and my detachment to my culture, and even being embarrassed of my culture because I wanted to fit in. So my relationship to it is very different. And I never want to overgive, because I never want it to be my relationship with this culture, is that I'm using it to give and using it to make money off of it. Something that I do want to share is the life values that I've learned through this dance. So my focus is sharing those values and that etiquette and that knowledge and the resources. So the vehicle in which I do that with can differ, but I'm not going to use what I'm passionate about. I don't know if that makes sense, but if that person is that wholeheartedly like, I don't want people to take advantage of this knowledge I want to share, then maybe it's not something that they should be sharing, because long term, especially in this time, it's just going to be something that hurts you. It's just going to be something that hurts you. I don't know if that kind of helps, but it is a tricky question, especially for COVID times.
For some reason, that gives me this idea of ownership, when really we don't own any of these knowledge or any of these stories or any of these things. What you do pay for is our time, and the time that we've spent being able to be eligible enough to teach you these things. And so yeah, it's like what AJ said, if you know, check your intentions, and if it doesn't meet with these certain things, then maybe it's not for you. Maybe you're not meant to share those things. And for me too, like I actually have said no to certain things. Like, for example, in immigrant lessons, Kevin asked me, hey, do you want to, we're going to Calgary, do you want to teach dance hall? And I said, I don't feel comfortable because I don't know enough about it to teach it. But I can share something, and like in my barangay project, I teach hip hop classes there for free. But do I take payment as well in my other classes? Of course, but then it's all about the whole sharing and giving, right? I'm giving you 1 hour of my time for free because for the love of sharing it. but yeah, thank you, AJ, for that. I think that's really what it is.
Thank you. It's that balance.
I think we have one more anonymous question, but Heather has an announcement before it about how we might go over.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't want to cut anyone off. I posted it in the chat as well. We're just going to go probably about 5 minutes over because we've been having some really great conversation. If you have to go, we will not be upset. We understand time is precious, but if you do have to go, thank you so much for being here and showing up today. And reminder that the recording will be posted on the Dance Horizons YouTube. But if you can stay for an extra 5 minutes, we'll keep going. Yeah, Nika, did you want to ask that question?
Yeah, and if you are exiting, the speakers' Instagrams are in the chat also. Okay, last anonymous question is, okay, I have a question. Since we've been talking a lot about teaching and learning to have the right intentions, I was hoping to ask the speakers if there's something that makes them hopeful for the future. Could be a teacher, someone who inspires them, something they see changing for the better, etc. Thoughts?
This person is wanting to know what are we hopeful for?
Yes, like what kind of intentions would you like to see, or who is someone who has exemplified these good intentions to you?
Oh, okay. I interpreted the question differently. I think there are a lot of teachers who teach with great intention. I'm really blessed to have a lot of teachers at DJD. I could drop all of their names, but their names are on the DJD website, so go check it out. I guess when you first asked the question, I heard something about hopefulness, though. Am I like not hearing this right?
I'm gonna quickly copy paste it.
Okay. Yeah, let me wait. Okay, hi, I have a question. It's really something that makes them hopeful for the future. Yeah, okay. Well, I will just say, like, I have this feeling that, life itself wants to live. And with life, you find culture, you find art. So art itself, culture itself wants to prevail and wants to carry on. And I'm very hopeful for that fact. I'm very inspired by time. And I look back generations and I see how art and the art forms that I love so much have evolved. And I'm so inspired by that. And from that inspiration, I feel a lot of hope. Like, look at where dancehall has started. Look at where it is today. Look at how dancehall was birthed from reggae. Oh my goodness. So what is dancehall going to birth? Look at how hip hop was birthed from funk, and funk was birthed from jazz. That's amazing. What is hip hop going to birth? Like, I'm very inspired and hopeful with time. Like, I think like this is something, this energy, this momentum that we create in art is it gives me hope for the future and what's down the road. So time, I'm inspired by time and hopeful about time. Yeah.
I love that. I something that I stuck with and that I kind of want to use to answer that question is, as we're talking about all these amazing different cultures, something that cannot be forgotten is that they were all created out of an uncomfortable amount, of pain and sadness and confusion and anxiousness and oppression, suppression of expression. Like that's what birthed a lot of these cultures and a lot of these dances that we're enjoying. So again, we are in a really hard time, like realistically, like things are very different. For a lot of us in this room, like things haven't been like this in our lifetime. So there's a lot of differences and there's a lot of scary things and uncomfortable things going on in the world. But knowing that, I also hold hope in my heart, because I know that there's going to be a lot of amazing things that again are created from this environment, from this pressure. Yeah, pressure breeds diamonds. But in all honesty, right? And something to add on to that is that these conversations are happening, right? Like these conversations are happening a lot more, like with a lot more communities and a lot more groups. So it's not that these conversations are new, like these topics aren't new, and that's why like I'm very grateful to be one of the speakers, but I'm very much of like the younger upcoming generation. Like I've learned a lot from like Sabrina, and like in terms of like even knowing a lot of the people in this that are on the panel that are also speaking. Like I've seen the work that they've done and just seen the years and the amount of things that they've pushed for their communities. So that's inspiring. But just to know that these conversations and this thought process, like people have been having these conversations, like now it's just in the open. So I feel like it's easier for us to find more like-minded people. And I think for you guys to be in this chat right now in this conversation, it is because you want to know and you want to grow and you want to better yourself. And there's no better way of doing that than surrounding yourself with people who also have that similar mindset. So I'm very excited to know that there's going to be beautiful things coming out, but also these conversations are happening. So beautiful people are going to continue doing beautiful things in the world. So that inspires me.
Yeah, just like what AJ said, I am hopeful for more conversations, especially in classes. I'm hopeful for teachers to talk more. I'm hopeful for students to ask more. I'm hopeful for students to keep asking outside of classes. And the hunger that I see in the youth today, especially for people of color, is that hunger to create space for themselves and claim their own identities. So I'm very hopeful for that. I'm hopeful for betterment and mindfulness.
I'd say like technology. It's it's crazy that we can have Zoom meetings now, because I'm sure if we had this as an event and people had to like travel, it would be harder to do this. But I'm hope like it keeps me like gives me hope to see that despite the challenges, like people still come together and people still try to find solutions together. Um, um, I'm also glad that people have started noticing the intentions. And this is a conversation that I think is going to be ongoing, and we're learning. So that keeps me hopeful, because I realize that right now, compared to like 3 years ago, right now people are more curious and people want to learn more. And what gives me hope is that I can see people willing to learn and taking the time to learn. So all of you being here gives us hope as teachers and as people who are trying to share culture. So thank you for being here. DH, thank you for organizing this, and also being a big presence in the dance scene on campus. So you guys are giving us hope too. So there's that.
You're giving us hope in return too. I've loved watching, kind of from afar, watching the progression and seeing you guys pop up all over the place. That's just my personal thing. It's really, really cool and amazing to see, and I love hearing the music always around. But I don't want to cut off. Serge, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Yeah, nothing in particular. But again, I would like to recognize the fact that us being able to sit here and have this conversation, which is not something we would have done a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, shows that as a community, as a society, we're progressing and we're starting to ask ourselves a few questions. And I would encourage all of us students and teachers alike not to again shy away from the moment, because there's a lot of things we could pick up by putting ourselves in that uncomfortable spot and saying, hey, I don't know this. Hey, I don't understand this. Hey, maybe my intentions as a teacher, as a student are not that clear. Let me figure that out, because once that's worked out, then we can all move forward together. It won't be a question of, I don't appreciate that dance style, I'm not going to give it a spoiler. You can still appreciate it because you're in a space where you understand your own value, and you don't have to try and take somebody else down because you feel like they may be encroaching on something you want to take ownership over, which again, we touched on in terms of like, we don't really own this. And Sabrina said it will be here once we kick the bucket. So Yeah. I just want to thank everybody here, thank the moderators, everybody behind the scenes who made this happen. And yeah, it's kind of great to be here and get to kind of speak your mind about a few things. And yeah, great panels. So yeah, appreciate you all.
Thank you all so, so much. I know we are over time. I think it was well worth it. I wish that we could just talk forever and ever and ever. The amount of knowledge and just things that have been shared today and questions asked, I hope that you're leaving and going away with things you can ask yourself, things you can ask your community and your friends, and joy and hope and light. And thank you, Nika, and all our panelists for bringing us into such a hopeful space at the end. Thank you so, so much to each and every one of our panelists, Sabrina, Ajay, Clement, Serge, Sophia. We really, really appreciate, like beyond what we can even say, you taking so much time out of your busy lives to come here and to share with us and to just keep that knowledge going and growing. Like that is really the backbone of what we're all doing as dancers and just like as human beings on this earth. So super happy. And thank you for all our audience members, like especially my students. Like I know y'all have projects and you're really putting a totally different kind of education first. And I'm just like really excited. Or, you know, you're not a student, everyone's busy. And I just really appreciate you all being here. It's so, so great to see. And you are so, so valued. And like, thank you for DH in general for like getting this going. And it was our president, Lauren Lau, was like, hey, we should do this thing. So shout out to her. And Campbell and Nika, I really cannot stress like how much of a key piece they have been in this. They're absolutely amazing. They have done so much work behind the scenes and so much work facilitating today. And they've just been fantastic. I could talk forever about how much gratitude I have for everybody here. I'm not going to blabber too much because then it gets out of hand. I was wondering if it's okay. We might want to like post a little something later to be like, hey, we did this event. We're going to do one again. You should come. It was cool. Lots of great people were there. Are you guys okay if I take a little weird picture of us on my Zoom phone? Yeah.
If you're here and you should turn on your camera. That'd be cool. That'd be dope.
Yeah. If you're up for that. I'm going to do yes.
I just want to say a massive thank you to Heather as well, because she took such initiative on this. She has been leading the charge, and I don't know how she made it seem like she's like organized everything in such an amazing and just like it's incredible how much time and effort she's put into this. So a massive shout out to you, Heather, for all the work.
Thank you.
Look at all these people who were here the whole time. That's crazy.
Yay! Amazing. So exciting. Thank you. Thank you, Campbell. Wonderful.
Okay, everybody pose.
Okay, everyone look cute. Oh, you're already achieving it. Great. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Amazing. Okay, there's so many people that I have to go to my second screen. So just hold on while I save that. And we're going to do another so everyone's included. I'm always paranoid.
If you're on the first or second screen.
Yeah, it's a mystery, so just look cute anyway. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Amazing. All right, and then speakers, if you have a minute, if you could just stay behind real quick so we could chat real quick as everybody leaves, that would be fantastic. I know we've taken up a lot of your time. And thank you, everybody. Thank you again. Take care of yourselves. Stay safe. Eat your dinner. Stay hydrated. Drink your water.
School, turn up.
Turn up, but in your house.
Safely. Don't